Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on Awabakal Country, and I pay my respects to all elders past and present and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show.
One of the things that I thought when I'd started doing the research and reading a lot more was understanding that because, the attitudes before they got to Japan were obviously these are the enemy. There are other Australians who got there and started to build empathy. The cognitive dissonance of all these different realities was what really started to make me very interested in the story.
Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you're looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review. It really helps the show out. If you also want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening to us and supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. Today, I'm joined by Chloe Adams, a journalist and fiction writer who has been published widely in Australian news mastheads and literary journals. She holds a master's degree in creative writing and a graduate certificate in international and community development, and her love of literature was shaped by her mother, who was an actress, playwright, and passionate second-hand bookstore owner. She's lived in the UK, Timor-Leste, and Adelaide, and she now calls Naarm, also known as Melbourne, home. But we're here to talk about her historical fiction debut, The Occupation, published by Penguin Random House Australia, which also won the 2024 Penguin Literary Prize, which you can get a copy of right now in the description. We will discuss some mild spoilers, so I recommend you grab yourself a copy now, or at least very soon. I started off by chatting with Chloe about winning such a prestigious award and also pulling from her own family past to dive into a part of history frequently forgotten. This episode was recorded on Awabakal Country. Chloe, all the way from beautiful Wurundjeri country of the Kulin Nation, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nick. It's lovely. It's actually not lovely outside in Melbourne. It's pouring with rain and it's very windy, but yes, thank you for having me.
It does really feel like that at the moment. It feels like it's raining everywhere and you can't stop it no matter what. But fortunately, I do get to rain some praise on you to kick off this podcast. Did you see that transition I did there? It was,
it's beautiful.
It was nice.
Yeah.
Because we get to talk about your book, The Occupation, which, to give you your flowers, and it was the 2024 Penguin Literacy Prize winner. First of all, big flex! What a way to hit the ground running. What was it? What did it mean to win an award like that for this story?
Yeah, it meant a lot to me because, I think it would mean a lot to anyone. But so a bit of context, I've been working on being a writer or an author, a fiction writer for a decade, and I've been a journalist for a long time before that. But I'd always harboured this secret desire to really write fiction. And after my son was born, 11 years ago, I thought I need to do this thing that, I'm going to raise this child and tell him he needs to follow his dreams, so I should be doing the same. So, 10 years, 2 other manuscripts had been written. One of them had a bit of interest but kind of hadn't gone anywhere. And then the second one I just felt like wasn't quite right. And then my mum told me this story, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But I thought, okay, I'll give it a third crack. And winning the Penguin Literary Prize was an amazing thing. And I think, partly, obviously, it's quite lucrative, so it's $20,000. There's also the opportunity for publication, which is huge, even more huge than I think the $20,000. And and also just like on some sort of existential level, just starting to allow myself to believe that that I am an author, or I am a writer, that what I have to say is maybe has some worth. And for 10 years I'd kind of had to I think part of being a writer, or certainly an emerging writer, is having to kind of construct your own belief in yourself because so little belief is coming from the external world. I mean, if you're lucky, you get, you've got a friend or a boyfriend or whatever, someone in your life who believes in you, but a lot of it has to come from inside. So yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, as it should be, and by the sounds of it, it's getting plenty of acclaim now that it is out in the world. Out of curiosity, I mean, at the time of us recording, the book has been out for just over a month now. Yep. We're recording this right at the end of August. What's the reaction been like? Has there been any sort of reactions that have surprised you, have delighted you, have made you go, wow, I'm now looking at this manuscript that I was working on for so many years in a brand new way? Has the reaction surprised you?
I don't know if there's been anything that's been like majorly surprised me, but there's certainly it's really pleasurable to hear people's perspectives and to see the things that they pull out. And it's not that that a lot of what they're saying is there in the text because you've had the same thought when you were writing it or editing it, but it's the fact that their takeaway, like they read 70 or 80,000 words, and when they come away, the thing that they're reflecting on later, it's variable depending on the person, and that's so interesting to hear the kind of where they place the emphasis. I think, yeah, it's interesting. I also have to say I've not looked at Goodreads because I'm just a bit too scared to look at Goodreads. So I'm a scaredy cat. Yeah, so I'm just working with mainstream media and then anecdotal, individual people. This point, yeah.
Well, look, I will say from what I've seen, across the media, people really connect with this story, and there's a very personal element to it. When this book kind of came across my radar, I was immediately like, I need to check that out, and I kind of want to hit you with a softball personal connection in that, hearing about Japan during this period of time is one that I've personally been interested in. For context, my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side was a POW, and he wrote a story about this period of time called Guest of the Emperor. He worked on the Thai-Burma Railway. He ended up in Japan towards the end of the war. Amazing book. I'm not just saying that because of family connections. Like, objectively, was an amazing story. It's great because this part of history, people don't, they think that the war ended and that was it. But of course it was not. Japan at the end, after the bombs dropped, is not discussed often.
No.
What was the assembly like, creating post-war Australia, of course, but also Japan on the page, particularly because, my first headspace was like, how does one, not just looking into the history, looking into the, the background of all of that, but you're also writing within a backdrop of a world that is freshly into the nuclear age, and humans now have the power to destroy themselves for the first time on a mass scale, which changes everything.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting to hear about I think you said great-great-grandmother. I'd love to get more information about that at some point, because through this process I've become quite a history buff about that period. But I think it is really interesting that a lot of Australians don't know much. Well, certainly younger Australians. So I'm in my 40s, and most people I feel my age and younger don't have necessarily an awareness that Australia was a part of the occupation force that occupied Japan in that period afterwards. And I think even more than that, I think that younger people, maybe we weren't, there was quite a Eurocentric emphasis in history in high school. And so there was a lot, I feel like I had a stronger sense of the European side of World War II than the Asian side of it until adulthood. So I don't know if that says something about our history curriculum or something, but maybe that's changed. But I think a lot of the people I've spoken to who are older, who will say, oh, yeah, Uncle Bob was part of the occupation force, or, there's a lot more familiarity with it. In terms of the research and, that was required for the story, there was a lot was required, but I also just found it so absolutely fascinating. And I think a part of what I was just saying before is that I think a lot of younger people don't appreciate, because we go to Japan now, it's an ally country. It's a place that a huge number of Australians go to for fun, for leisure. and we have warm relations with the Japanese people. So to try to go back in the imagination, or actually in history, to reality, and understand that there was a period of time where Australians thought Japan was going to invade their country, and that was a very real prospect. Well, it felt like a real prospect. So, yeah, I think I was lucky that in the researching of it, there's a huge number of people, Australians particularly, but also of other Western nations who had been in Japan in that period. So much material to draw on. So books, like published books, obviously, but then, in every state library of Australia, there's a lot of other material that's sort of one-off. Someone wrote down their thoughts or their memories, and, it's sitting. I mean, the most amazing part of researching for me is being able to go into the state library and, these special books, there's one left, or maybe there was only ever one, depending on how it was published. And you go in there and they put it on a cushion and they give you the white gloves and you're in a special room. And just the sense of preciousness of history being right there on that cushion is just an amazing experience. But heaps of material to draw on. In terms of the nuclear stuff, it's really interesting to think about how much. I was quite surprised by how much my impression of nuclear war has changed a lot in understanding the kind of attitudes of the time compared to the attitudes now. And we could have a whole conversation about what Trump has done to the world order and how dangerous that is for nuclear non-proliferation. But, going back and looking at, I think one of the things I didn't appreciate was that when the US took control of Japan, they put a huge censorship program in place. And so all the information that was going out of Japan in that period straight after the bomb, or straight after surrender, which was only, a few days later, was being censored by the Americans, and even the information that the Japanese were allowed to publish in their own media was being censored by the Americans. And so they wanted a narrative of this is the weapon to end all weapons, and we'll never go to war again because, yay, we've solved it somehow. Like, it's so naive to think of it now, but that's what they thought. That's what they wanted to think. And interestingly, they censored all the photos and the images and the information that conveyed any of the human suffering. So they wanted people in the world, or particularly the Western world, to kind of think about as this kind of this solution, but not a solution that anyone should think too deeply about what that actually means for the suffering of the people who, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so you'll see a lot of the photos that come out of that time are wide shots, and there's just, a tree or a broken bit of metal or, remains of a building, but there's no human images, or very little at that time. And then slowly, of course, as all censorship is flawed, slowly the real true story came out. Yeah. But then also in the period that I'm writing in 1948 and 49, there was this interesting thing that I came across, these attitudes from Australians who were saying, they said it was this decisive weapon, but it's not really, because by 1948 people had obviously been rebuilding Hiroshima, the plants and gardens had started to grow back. And so it was almost, I think, a comfort, or, a comfortable place to think, everything's fine for these people now. Like, we will forget about the 80,000 people who maybe died, but if you just look at it now, the buildings are back, it's all good, it's all back to normal. Of course it wasn't, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like digging into that research answers so many questions. I mean, going back to your point about like the European-centric history we were taught in schools, it does make me realise, well, history was written by the victors in that particular regard, and the information was controlled by it. And that particular point you mentioned about Japanese, the feeling towards the Japanese at the time. I mean, just to give you another teaser off the back of that, the name of we'll talk about this book afterwards if you're interested, but the name Guest of the Emperor is a sarcastic one. By my great grandfather, because he met a Japanese diplomat and many years afterwards and said, you've been to Japan? He goes, yes, I was a guest of the emperor. He goes, what, you've been to the palace? And he responded, no, I was a prisoner of war. Which, very much gives you a sense of how much distrust and anger there was in Australia towards Japan, and a lot of, a lot of ways that Japan was perceived racially, or in terms of a threat. It was far from the view that we see today. Off the back of that, I mean, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but there's one other key element I know in the assembly of this book for you, which is you pulled from your own family history for this story. I believe the word you used, there's an unexamined shadow, I believe was the phrase that I've seen around. Tell me a bit about that, and pulling from your own family history to create this book.
So I grew up knowing, at some point I understood that my grandmother had been in Japan in this period after the war and worked there, but being kind of young, just, not that interested in history at that point in my life, didn't give it too much thought. And then a few years ago, my mum was telling me a story about how my grandmother and so I'm not giving too much away, as you know, because the very first chapter of the book is somewhat based in this story that my mum had told me, where this grandmother, my biological grandmother, had returned from Japan, and she meets my adoptive grandmother in a fancy hotel in Melbourne, and they have this conversation where Mary, the protagonist, also my grandmother was a Mary, agrees to give her child to the married cousin because she's come back unwed. And so I knew this story, and then I asked my mum, could I have a look at the letters that I knew there were some letters that my grandmother Mary had written from Japan. And so I went back and had a look at those letters. And one of the things, I mean, the whole sort of era is fascinating, and that scene of the two women meeting in the hotel was felt very kind of powerful, kind of on an imaginative level for me. But it really took off at the point where I started to look at the letters and thinking about what that life would have been like for the Australians going over to Japan. And one of the things that was really striking, because I've got this modern impression of what I believe Japan is and what I understand about the Japanese people, kind of butted up against the history of seeing these people as the enemy. One of the things that really kind of was jarring for me in those letters from my grandmother was hearing she doesn't talk that much about the Japanese. Also, I should say, my mum, when my mum received them, after my grandmother had died, they came into my mum's possession, and she actually threw out some of the pages that it was too racist, and my mum didn't want to have them just exist, so she, I think, burned them or something. So I don't have the full kind of experience, but of the letters of the pages that are left behind, it's my grandmother, it's Mary talking about going to dances and picnics, and her house girl, who's the Japanese domestic worker who worked in her room, was going to press her dress for her, and which frock is she going to wear, and they're going on these touring sites, and the whole thing, I was thinking, this just sounds like a holiday, like what's going on here? And at the same time, just down the road from their headquarters is the Japanese people who were trying to rebuild their lives after one of the most horrific things that's ever happened in human history. And it just felt so jarring to me, and there wasn't a huge amount of reflection. There was a few little bits here or there where she would refer to the kind of desperate, hungry children, and so there's sort of like an inkling of empathy, but one of the things that I thought when I'd started doing the research and reading a lot more was understanding that because, the attitudes before they got to Japan were obviously such a pronounced sense of these are the enemy. And then when they started to get there were some Australians who maintained that kind of rage and behaved very, very poorly towards the Japanese. There are other Australians who got there and started to build empathy. And when they actually saw that the Japanese were ordinary people just like them, struggling to survive, and maybe, often they were having more interactions with the women and children. And so that's on record that there was a lot of Australians who started to feel while they were there that they would their attitudes had changed, but the Australian attitude back home had not changed. And so, again, there's a kind of two realities happening. Yeah, so all those kind of the cognitive dissonance of all these different realities was what really started to make me very interested in this story.
So let's talk about it. I think we've danced around the book enough. Let's dive into the world of the occupation. So this is kind of the part of the show where, you know, I like to say to authors, hit me with a 1 minute pitch. It's the classic elevator pitch. I hop into a lift. You are in there with me. We're going up. What is, for all of our listeners, I've got the cover up on the screen now. What is the occupation about?
Oh, gosh, it's so hard. It's the worst bit. Does every author say this? It's the worst bit trying to...
Yes, they do, actually. Like, I always frequently have to cut it. Sometimes I cut it out there being like, oh, God, I hate the elevator pitch.
No, well, my elevator pitch is normally that, you know, it's loosely based on my grandmother's experience. I've already touched on that. I think for me, it's about how travel changes us. And I drew on some of my own personal experiences of travelling. I lived in East Timor for a year, and obviously while East Timor and Japan are completely different cultures, there was some resonances there that I was able to draw on. So yeah, for me it's about Mary goes to Japan, and she has her eyes opened to a lot of realities that she'd never understood before, and I think she grows as a person. But also it's an uncomfortable place, and she makes some bad decisions along the way. Well, you know, arguably bad decisions.
Ding, we've arrived at the level. We will provide some tiny little mild spoilers, but long of the short of it to everyone listening, hopefully we give you enough tasters to go and want to check out the book yourself.
Yes.
But I will say this, having put the book down recently, this is a story about shifting morals, complexity of narrative, and the different mindsets that people have. There is a large discussion about womanhood, the challenges women faced in this particular period of time, where their places in the world are. There is a lot about race, mistreatment of people, of the Japanese people. There is politics. And I think it boils down to the title. It's about occupation. And occupation comes in many forms of this book.
Yeah.
In this book, we live in a time. You know, this is. I haven't actually even got a question to say here. But this is a time fresh off war where scars are still real, and like you kind of have alluded to so far, people are reacting to it in very, very different ways. Some are being oblivious to it. Some are thinking, you know, keeping their assumptions in check about many different people, but some have their eyes opened as well.
Yeah, and I think I hope that I've conveyed quite a few different perspectives in the book, because obviously the main perspective is we're seeing this experience through the lens of Mary's eyes, but yeah, I think, you know, when I went into this story, I started to have this, I think I began with this kind of naive idea that I needed to find out what the dominant cultural view of the time was, as if there's only ever one. And yes, there were absolutely dominant cultural views, but then I became more interested in a range of experiences and how, our worldview and also just experiences when we're travelling can change our view of another person or other people or other cultures. And, I'm sure we'll get to the characters in a little while, but the character of Sully is a key, apart from the fact that I love Sully and just enjoyed writing him as a journalist. He is a really key vehicle for Mary's expanding understanding of the world. Yeah.
We'll dive into the characters now, because I feel like Mary's the best place to start here, because I think of all of the characters, she undergoes probably one of the largest shifts across this story. Not to say that other characters don't, but when we see her in Melbourne, she is reserved. She's come back to Japan unwed, pregnant. But also it's clear that this time that she has spent has left a mark in Japan, in this faraway place, has left a mark on her. When we kind of see her, you kind of have alluded to it, but she very much early on, when she's in Japan early, she is very, very much viewing Japan as a adventure, a carefree experience. She's with expats. She's traveling all around Japan. She's, as you say, having picnics, throwing parties, drinking, having that lifestyle. And to the point where the disconnect is almost jarring when you consider that this is Japan shortly after the end of the Second World War. Tokyo was burned to the ground. 2 atomic bombs have been dropped on this country, and war and it has clearly had a significant impact on the locals. And then, of course, as you say, meeting Sully, she undergoes an amazing, I mean, on the page at least, very confronting for her, but on the page for us as a reader, an incredible moral transformation. She very much, this expat experience, I kind of viewed it as it's very black and white. Very much like this is the way the world is in some ways, and this is the way the world is other. Probably very much like the historical context that we've had around us. Tell me about her and her moral journey, because I feel like this is the real crux of the occupation.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think, when I thought about the challenges, and maybe we'll get to this, but as a white writer writing about and having the main characters be white characters in someone else's culture, it just seemed so important to me that there had to be some kind of moral centre to the story. And I feel like Sully kind of acts as that moral centre, and Mary's journey or her growth is about kind of edging towards the moral centre, but it obviously takes some time, and there's some fallout as a result of that for her on a personal level. Mary has grown up in Melbourne in a relatively well-off family. She's, quite privileged in some regards, or financially she is. Her dad is quite, family quite well-to-do. Her mother has died, though, when she was young, and then her dad had remarried. So she's living, and also in the early period of the war, she was engaged to a man, but then he went off to war and died. So by the time the late 40s come around, she's been living for about a decade as an adult in her father's home, helping raise the small children that have the part of the second marriage. And she's desperate to kind of be free of the so when I say she's privileged, her family are financially privileged, but kind of on a power level, and not uncommon for that time, but as a woman she didn't actually have very much power or kind of agency over her life and the choices that she wanted to make. But she got this one chance, and so she convinces her father to let her go over to Japan to join this occupation force. She's trained as a dental nurse to be able to go across. And then the first major hurdle for Mary is that when she gets there, she discovers that she won't be working as a dental nurse because the dental hospital's actually closed, and they've reassigned her to work in a kind of a cafe on the base, and the customers coming in and out of the other Australian military folk and wives and children, Australian wives, Australian children, that sort of thing. In the beginning, she kind of gets swept up into this world of spending time with, her flatmates, the women who share the space, the dorm that she's in effectively. And one of them's not such a pleasant character. The other one's okay. But basically I see it as a set of, there's a kind of river there, and she just jumps in, and this is what we're doing. This is what the Australians do when they come to Japan. Everyone goes off to look at Hiroshima because that's what you do. It's only down the road. You go and look at the total devastation for yourself. You go for picnics, you do the parties, you wait for the next dance. This is the life. And there's a kind of lack of questioning about it. But I think there is early on a sense that Mary's probably got the potential for deeper consideration than maybe some of her peers. And then really it's at the point that she meets Sully that it's almost like he gives her permission to think a little bit more deeply about the complexities of this place.
This is a great time to bring Sully in, who, no spoiler, I bloody love Sully. I think I could tell that you, when you said that you really enjoyed writing Sully, it definitely comes off in the page. Not that you don't enjoy the other characters, or but just Sully. He really starts this dovetail into making the world many, many shades of grey instead of black and white. A journalist, he's determined to resist against the many narratives and censorship that is going out there, frankly, that are racist towards the Japanese people. He wants to try and change those narratives about Australians occupying there and really highlight the ordinary people, the people, the Japanese people who are still dealing with significant trauma, who are dealing with, the challenges of trying to rebuild their lives, seemingly while all of these expats are having a wonderful old time. There's a lot of confrontation in his story. I love the contrasting. A great example. I love Mary when she comes over. She has this view about the bomb, about Hiroshima, how the Americans dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, and she believes they did the right thing because it ended the war and saved the lives of soldiers and saved the lives of one of her brothers was at war. It saved his life as well. It would have saved thousands and thousands of people who arguably was seen as the humane thing to do. And it seems so black and white and easy to fall into that narrative. And yet, with a moment, Sully, she has contrast. I love the scene where he explains, well, this killed hundreds of thousands of people. This thing, innocent, and not people who were defending Japan, people who intended harm. These were innocent people, and it wasn't. It was the sort of killing that's not the clean nature of shooting someone. It was horrendous. It was violent, and it was brutal. And the people who live with it and lived through that, the trauma still persists. And it is the moment really where, the penny starts to drop in terms of the moral questioning. Tell me, it's such a hard question to ask, but tell me about Sully.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked him. That's nice. I think Sully came from two places. One, I'm a journalist, as I mentioned, so I think the kind of traditional idea of a journalist, certainly through time, and maybe that's changing a little bit, but is this idea of them being slightly an outsider, and there's a lot of question asking, and I think that we're, as journalists, you're raised to ask difficult questions. Your job is to kind of keep authorities accountable for their actions, and so that was the one hand that's I think a lot of the Sully comes from that part of my mind, but I also came across this amazing man through my research, and his name was Alan S. Clifton, and he wasn't a journalist. He was actually an intelligence officer for the military, and he wrote this incredible book. He, like Sully, he spoke fluent Japanese and had been there for quite some time. And because he spoke the language, he had access to understand people's experiences and I guess also build rapport with people. So one of the things that, Mary and also my grandmother, I understood from what I read, had very little capacity to really engage with the Japanese people. They were banned from fraternising with the so-called enemy, and they might meet some of the domestic labourers working in their room or in the kitchen or whatever, but that's a quite superficial relationship that can't go very far when you don't have shared language. And also I think there's a power imbalance there when someone's working for you as well, so that's problematic. But so Sully has language, and he has this sort of natural personality of wanting to ask questions. And I don't think, that thing that you referred to when Mary has this kind of straight up narrative of why it was good, why it was not good, but why it was necessary that the bombs needed to be dropped.
The moral justification, yeah.
Yeah. And whereas I don't think Sully really comes back with a kind of clear-cut narrative to oppose it, he just complicates it. He just says, but what if and what about, and is that quite right? And I'm not sure. And a lot of Sully's perspective, which really I feel like we've kind of lost a little bit of in our modern culture because of social media, and there's so much division and there's so much anger, is just the ability to say, I don't know, but I'm not sure if that's right, or that doesn't feel quite right to me. So yeah, he can be a bit sort of, I guess, didactic, but sometimes it's just about complicating her view. Yeah, and questioning it.
Yeah, we'll kind of come back to this as a great place to finish talking about the book, but there's one other element that I do really want to ask about, and that is, the experience that Mary has when this book, when this book kind of starts. It's autumn of 1949, and you have Tess and Mary, kind of as we alluded to, meeting in this Melbourne hotel, and I really want to talk to you a little bit about the place of women that you kind of put in this book, because there's a great narrative and subtext about this, because at the time Tess is married and childless, and Mary is pregnant and unwed, and they make a life-altering pact about the decision that Mary will give her child to Tess, which it's right. It's everyone will say spoiler, but don't worry, there's a bunch of others. But I did, it's an interesting narrative about the examination that women experience at this time, because in this time you were supposed to get married and supposed to have children, and there were certain things that you were supposed to do and things that you weren't allowed. And I felt like there was almost another element of occupation that lingers in these roles that women were told to play, about, patriarchy, which dovetails into Mary a little bit with the experiences and challenges that she has, the idea to think for oneself, which I think is critical in this story as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is so interesting, and I agree. I mean, the stories of women is all through the book, and it begins and it ends, so it's sort of bookend with that experience of Mary and what's going to happen with this baby. So Tess is somewhat loosely based on my adoptive grandmother. She's a lovely human being. My grandmother, Granny Sheila, is just a delight of a human being, and Tess is a good person too. But I think for Mary, because she's going to be giving, there's this agreement from, as we said, it's not really a spoiler because it's the very first chapter and then we go back in time. There's a sense Mary is not quite sure where to direct her rage, and Tess, because Tess is the one who gets to keep the baby, is kind of the obvious place. And a part of Mary's, without saying too much, but a part of Mary's experience when she gets back to back to Australia is, there's another good third of the book at that point of her trying to kind of integrate what she's understood about Japan back into the world, her home world, and how actually difficult it is to reacclimatise when you've been so changed, when you've travelled. But another part of it is trying to understand where that rage is that she's directing towards Tess is coming from. And as you said, with the title of the book, that there is layers of occupation here, and some of it is just that women at that time, I think, had kind of inhabited certain male views that they had sort of been forced to, ingest and sort of take upon themselves. And we see that with other women characters in the book, like Ida and Mrs. Richards. Mrs. Richards is a good example of, like, women had so little power that they took what they could, and so for Ida, she sort of uses the power that she has as her beauty and kind of this seductress kind of personality. But for Mrs. Richards, it's the fact that she's the captain's wife, so, she's important in their little tiny little fish pond of a artificial society that they've set up in Japan. But also, she's using her power. But there's sort of like there's a charitable element to what she does over there, but it always feels like she's trying to gain power as well. So, what am I trying to say? I think what I'm interested in is that on the one hand, women did have so little power, and then on the other hand, they found ways, maybe misguided ways or maybe totally reasonable ways, to try to have some agency in that world. And that's something that interests me.
Yeah, it pivots back. I mean, it's been something I've been very interested in covering a lot of the books that I've done doing this show, particularly this over the course of this year, that there has been many more stories, adding more. History is not black and white. History is a kaleidoscope, and it is filled with many different colours and views and perspectives. And this book feels like a great examination of that, bringing it back to that moral element that has been a very key part of this story. I love the line that the war came and suddenly it departed, which is like, it feels is such a great contrast. And I think, it's great that you kind of mentioned the idea of feeling like we're losing that a little bit, because I think humans want it to be simple. We want it. In some ways, there's an element of us that wants it to be simple and easy to understand, and we want these problems to be black and white, like how Mary views Japan at the start. But the world is not like that. It's many shades of grey, and I tip the hat for you attempting to try and tackle those moral elements in this story. And out of curiosity, do you have any answers how the heck we take on such complex, loaded realities on situations like politics, on situations like gender, on situations like race that come through in the occupation?
Yeah, I think some of it comes with age, which is a terrible thing to say, because it would be better if we all could kind of maybe lean into it a little bit. But, when you're young, there's so much rage that comes from injustice. And I'm not saying all people grow out of that at all, or that all people are like that, but there seems to be a tendency. And I know when I was young, I got really fired up about some issues. And, even like 5-10 years ago, I was so fired up about environmental issues that I found myself feeling really kind of judgy towards other people, and like, I'm here, I'm protesting in the streets, this is so important, why don't you all understand? And if we all just did our part, then we could solve it. And it's just not as simple as that, because there's systemic problems in our society. And so I think I've learned over time to try to be a little bit more measured and sort of step back and try to inhabit different perspectives. And I think, unfortunately, almost all of the time, when you stop sort of judging individual humans, it almost always leads back to systemic problems. And the only way to change is for humans to try to unite and fix the systemic problem, whether that's political or economic or whatever it is. But and some of them, like colonisation, we can't really undo at this point. But I think, getting off social media is probably my biggest tip. But, I'm on social media, so I'm not really in a position to judge.
Oh, that's out of curiosity, it's a question I like to ask at the end of every discussion about a book. But I hope readers really get a lot out of this story. There's a lot to dissect. There's a lot to examine. There's a lot of questions that are posed. What did writing The Occupation teach you? Be it Chloe the human, Chloe the writer, Chloe the journalist. What did the act of creating this piece of work teach you?
Yeah, such a great question. Big question.
Big question. I'm sorry. It is big.
No, I like big questions. No problem at all. It's interesting coming off the back of the previous question, because I think one of the things, apart from getting off social media, actually for me, writing is the thing that helps me to see the grey in a situation. And so it's that grappling. And I think a lot of my writing, this book, as well as some of the other stuff I've written, is a really kind of trying to grapple with something and not coming out the other end with some easy answer necessarily, but feeling that I've grown in just understanding the breadth of experiences of other people. So I would say the writing, particularly in that, in this little sphere of the world, I just feel like I have so much more of a sense of just how external factors like war just play havoc with individual people's lives. So that's another thing, just this, it's like a tidal wave, and we see this in Gaza, we see this in Ukraine and Sudan and all over the world, but World War II was a huge example of it. Just you can know, how you can know something but not know it. And then after having written this book and spending 3 years thinking about this stuff, I feel like I understand it on an emotional level now, just the huge lack of agency that so many people in the world have because of things totally beyond their control. And on a personal level, I think, having spent, so I didn't mention, but my grandmother, the biological grandmother, Mary, I only got to meet her once in my life. So I was about 12 when my mum took me and my siblings to go and meet her. And because I think I was 12, maybe I was 10. I was young enough that I didn't really fully appreciate what was happening, the significance of that moment. And so being able to go through this process of imagining Mary's life has been, I think, quite profound from a family sort of, my mum grew up adopted, which we always knew, but it definitely, adoption change, it does shape people in a way that's hard to kind of articulate. And I even feel that it shaped me, so my siblings. And so, yeah, it's a feeling of having maybe healed some tiny little part of myself or, my family, and being able to allow myself time to imagine Mary's experience. That sounds a bit cheesy, doesn't it? But that's sort of how it feels.
It's a fantastic answer to a very big question. So I'm glad it taught you many, or kind of brought you many new perspectives on many different fronts. Out of curiosity, what's next? Will we see you write again?
Well, I certainly hope so. I do write most days of my life, but I don't know exactly what the next step is. So I had a couple of manuscripts up my sleeve from previous years, which were, the first one I look back and think, oh, thank God that didn't reach the light of day, because it wasn't great. But I do have an opportunity now to look back at it, and I really do still feel a sense of connection to the story. So I'm just at the moment trying to work out what form it might take, if anything, and if not, I'll move on. I've got a couple of other ideas up my sleeve, but yeah, I think it's probably a couple of years now. That's how it goes.
We'll finish off the podcast by doing a rapid fire part of the date, which is basically a section where I fling a bunch of questions at you and you have to give me the first answer that comes to your head. Chloe,
okay.
Are you ready?
Okay, I'll try. Oh, yes, I am.
All right, here we go. First up, what is your favourite book that you've read in the last 12 months?
So I read an amazing book by a woman called Isabella Hamad. I think that's how you pronounce her surname. And it's called Enter Ghost. And I absolutely loved it, and I highly recommend it. Am I allowed to talk about it, or is it too rapid fire? I need to move on to the next
no.
Okay.
This is
It's an amazing book because Isabella is Palestinian British, I believe, but it's a story about a British woman going back to Palestine, and it's a little bit, there's some similarities with the occupation in that her kind of rigid ideas about Palestine and Israel are kind of upended, and there was so much nuance in it. It's just incredible. I highly, highly recommend it. I think it was published a few years ago, but I only got to it this year.
Hey, regardless, the fact that you've enjoyed it is what's most important. Do you have a favourite debut novel that you've ever read? So we're talking across your entire life that you go, how the hell did that person hit the ground running with a book like that?
Oh, there's so many examples, isn't there? So many amazing examples, the sorts of examples that writers, you just think, oh my God, how did they do that? But I don't know if I'm allowed to. My favourite writer of all time is a woman called Shirley Hazard. I don't know if you've come across her.
No.
Okay, well, I'll put that up. I'm going to show you this book because it's one of my favourite books of hers, but I love all of them. But she wrote a collection of short stories first, so I don't know if this counts, but this is her first novel, and it's incredible.
That counts.
And,
that counts. We're flexible here.
Okay, great. But if I had to be pure about it, the other amazing book that I think is just absolutely brilliant is Homegoing by Yaa Ghazi, and I think, again, that was probably published 5 or 10 years ago. And she's a Ghanaian American, I think. But it's so, for a debut, it's really accomplished. And its structure is fascinating. So it is kind of, has these sort of lots of different sort of short sections that go over hundreds of years. And it follows the kind of arc of slavery, basically. So I can't remember when it begins, 1600s or something. It's a long way back. And follows this family story through the movement of humans around from Africa to America.
Sounds dense and intense, and I would love to get a hand on that. And,
it's not too dense. It's readable. That's what's great about it. It's readable, but also so thought-provoking.
Oh, I love it. Do you have a favourite word?
Oh, gosh. I can't believe. No, I don't. I don't. Do I have to come up with one? That is hard.
All right, here's a good one. Actually, here's a good one.
Okay.
If you can't come up with a good word, a favourite word, how about, was there a word when you were doing the manuscript that your editor pulled you up and said, you've said this word too many times, cut this word out?
No, but I think or maybe it's gazing. I do seem to have my characters gazing off a lot, or gazing at someone, or gazing. Yes, I do love the gaze. The interesting word in itself. And so kind of it can mean just looking across at someone, or it can mean like really examining them, or it can be the whole lens of like through how you see the world. Yeah, maybe that's my word, my favourite word, which I need to not use too often.
Well, my headspace is, if you're doing this first draft, just get it out as best as you possibly can. Fall back on all those words, like just to get it out there. You can mold it into something beautiful later. Obviously, as part of this, you've been to Japan, you've explored that world a little bit. Is there anywhere in Japan that you think, like, you wish people knew a little bit more about? Whether it be for historical reason, whether it be for sheer adventure and joy. Is there anywhere in Japan that you think is underrated?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think, well, I mean, Hiroshima is the place that, centres quite a lot in my book, and I wouldn't say it's underrated. Most Australians know about it. Many Australians have been there. But maybe it's about going back to those places with a kind of greater sense of Australia's history. When I was wandering around Hiroshima, I came across a few Australians and, just chatting, telling them my story, what I was there for, certainly the most recent visit, which is for the research. And they're all kind of shocked. They're, Australians like our age, sort of going, what? I didn't know about that. How did I not know about that? So maybe it's more about visiting the place so that, there's something really powerful about being in a place and being able to imagine a past time. Like when you go to the Colosseum and you step in there, and because you know enough about it, you're like imagining the lions and the crazy stuff that was going on there. And so, maybe it's more about that, being able to kind of use our imaginations in a more powerful way when we are visiting those places.
That's a great answer. Love that. You've been a journalist for many, many years. It is a crazy, chaotic, but incredibly fun job. Do you have any favourite stories being a journo?
Oh, well, I don't know.
We can say within reason on a podcast if there's anything.
Oh yeah, I know. Look, when I was young, I was asked to I worked at the Herald Sun. It was my first job for 7 years, and was asked to sort of do things that I look back now and think, oh my God, why did I agree to that? One of them, like waiting outside, when the police think that someone's murdered someone, but they haven't quite got enough information yet. Sometimes they'll let they'll just sort of pass on the address of the person to the media, and then the media all kind of just hangs there for days on end. So there was one particular, high-profile case, I won't say which, where I just had to sit outside this guy's house for I think a week straight. And then that doesn't sound exciting. That sounds dead boring. But he was a murderer, and I was kind of scared of him. And I'm just sitting in a car as a 22-year-old, just going, I don't know if I should be here, but I'm asked to, so that's why I'm here. When I got to the ABC, I wasn't asked to do those sorts of jobs so much after that, but I did have an amazing. The greatest job I ever had was working on the morning program on News Breakfast on the TV on ABC, and we'd get up at 2:00 in the morning, and it started at 6, but you got there at 2, so you'd set your alarm for 1:00 in the morning. That was when you got out of bed, and then every now and then your boss would say, oh, you can come in at 3:30, and you would be so stoked. You thought 3:30 in the morning was just that's great. Sleep in. Yeah, I'm sure there's lots more.
It looks so glamorous, doesn't it?
Well, luckily I was never on TV because no one would have wanted to see how tired and horrendous I looked. But I was just one of the people at the back in the background.
It's so funny whenever people see the writing on the page and all the anchors on television and they think, oh, look at that, look how easy it is, and you always never stop to think, oh, the lengths that people have gone to tell those stories, get those adventures out there. It is it never ceases to amaze me of having had my own little background of that myself.
Oh yeah, it's pretty amazing industry. You've always got good stories for your friends. Yeah, some of them I'm probably not going to tell you right now, unfortunately. Sorry to say.
What is your one piece of advice for any new or aspiring writers listening to the show?
Yeah, it's such a I hear a lot about this idea of persistence. And I do agree 100% with the idea of persistence. But I think the thing where I went wrong for a number of years was feeling that I just needed to persist with like the pitching, and I need to get an agent, I need to get publication deal, I need to get my essays in literary magazines or whatever it is. So there was this sense of like just having to keep submitting. And then at some point I was really frustrated, like for a number of years, really frustrated by that. And then I reckon about 5 years into my 10-year journey, I started to understand that actually the persistence is in the writing. So just keep writing, because after a decade I can see how much progress I've made, and I'm excited about the idea that I might make the same amount of progress in the next decade. And that's actually the bit that's so exciting. And maybe the agent and the publication deal will come as a product of it, but just keep your head in the writing. That's my advice.
That is a fantastic answer to that question, because at the end of the day, you become a writer by writing. There is no other way. It's the truth of it.
Yeah, and also the satisfaction comes in creating something that you're proud of, and you want to keep working towards that. Yeah.
And last question, are you happy?
Oh, that's such a nice question. Yeah, I'm really happy. I feel like some days I'm the luckiest person in the world, and then I feel terribly guilty about that. But I've got a family that love me, and I love them. I've got a roof over my head, and I'm at the moment getting to do the thing I love doing. So, yeah, it's a problem because I spend some time thinking about how horrendous the world is and not feeling like I should be this happy. But anyway, that's a whole nother question, and I've put a dampener on your happy question.
Well, I will say I'm happy because I got to chat to you today. And Chloe, it's been an absolute pleasure sitting here talking about this amazing book called The Occupation. To all of our listeners, you can get a copy. It's out now in the world. It is published by Penguin Random House. It won the Penguin Literary Prize in 2024. So if you're listening, you can grab a copy in the description. If you can't afford a copy, you can check it out at your local library as well. You can help out your local library, support them there too. No matter where you are, you can always get the chance to travel into a different world with this amazing book. Chloe, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure having you on Date with a Debut.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It really helps the show out. If you want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Catch you soon! Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production.